So thus far, my videos have been focused around UK-based music, but this one is going to be much more general and applicable to any genre. So what I'm going to be discussing in this video is creating a template and my method for doing this. If you've ever found yourself in a creative frame of mind whilst making music, but then feel yourself bogged down by sample selection, then this video should be very useful to you. Now, templates aren't particularly glamorous, but they are very important. You can see my template here. I've got a couple of kicks, a low kick, some kicks that I have in here from a sample pack, got a snare rack, hat rack, clap rack, and then I've got some extra percussion here as well. We've got a little impact effect type thing, and then we've got a couple of basses and then a few leads as well, and then we've got a pad here. Obviously you could have more than this, but this is just the basic template that I'll often start to work with. So the first thing to decide when you're making a template is what kind of samples and instruments you want to use. And this will often be based on the genre of music that you're making. So normally I'd head to Splice and I'd look up some sort of genre appropriate or artist appropriate Splice packs. For my own template, which I just showed you, I'll use a range of different sounds from different genres, but that's kind of because I like to make lots of different types of music. For this video, I'm just going to make a sort of UK garage style template. So the first part of the template I will be making is the drums. So this is how I start with the template. You can see that I've dragged in a number of different samples. I've got some kicks, claps, snares, and hats. Some of these are from Splice, however, some are also from my forthcoming sample pack. The reason I've dragged them out in audio first is that it's a little bit easier to work with them. So if we look at this kick drum, we can just make sure that the kick drum starts exactly at the 0 crossing. And this is because once we drag the samples into drum racks, it'll be difficult to make these kind of adjustments and you have to do it cell by cell. So this saves a bit of time. So this is an audio editing phase, and I'm going to do this for every individual drum sample. So now that I've made sure all these samples start at the right point, I'm going to start dragging them into drum racks. And I'm just going to complete this process for all of the samples. So now you can see that I've put everything into drum racks. Now there's a number of things that I'll do at this point. One of them is tuning. So for example, I have tuned this kick drum, which wasn't quite at a D, but I've tuned it to ensure that it is a D. I've also renamed it within Simpler, and I'd do this process for all of the kicks and any other pitch percussion, particularly snares. Another thing that I do, for example, with the claps, is that I'd add a saturation rack. Here I'm favoring parallel saturation. You can hear it just adds a bit more aggression. I might also add some EQ afterwards as well. Now that I have saturated these, I might decide that this has a bit too much sustain, so I might then use the ADSR within Simpler to just tighten the sample up a bit. As you may have realized from what I just showed you, one advantage of creating a template is that it keeps these kind of tuning and processing and enveloping separate from actual music making, which is why it will help you speed up your workflow. You can also, for example, on the hi-hats, you could start panning these hi-hats if you wanted to. I usually leave that for the end because it's dependent on which hats I choose and kind of what the rhythm is or what the patterns are. So now I'm just going to add the remaining elements. So in this case, it's going to be bass instruments, effects and impacts, lead instruments, and I'm probably going to add a pad as well. So this is my final template. Just a quick note with the kick. I use Bassism to ensure that I can tune my kicks. So what I'll have is Bassism will be this low layer, and then I'll have the kick rack for the high layer. In this case, I've split the frequencies at 120 Hertz. This is dependent upon the way that the kicks interact with each other. So sometimes I might cut this a little bit higher. Other times I might kind of cut it a little bit lower. But this is something that I'll always use my judgment to make a decision on. You can see here we have or the previous drum racks. If we now have a look at some of the impacts, having effects is very important. Ideally, make a rack of these using the audio editing techniques that I showed you for the drum samples. I've done more kind of like textural stretching and stuff, but I may specifically do a video on this kind of stuff at a later point. Bass wise, we've got a few different instruments, all kind of garage themed, and then we've got some leads as well. And then that last pad. So you may have noticed I use some overdrive for the bass instruments. Often I will use saturation in the template making stage, like in this instance, but you'll notice that I haven't really processed the leads yet. And that's because I just want to give myself an element of freedom. Having said that, I would normally use saturation and maybe some bit crushing on the majority of leads. However, in this instance, I've left them blank so that I can decide if or how much I want to saturate them once I've made a track using this template. Also wanted to quickly mention the sends as well. I've just got this reverb here. As I've alluded to in other videos, I kind of want to reflect sort of club spaces. So I've got this guitar rig preset, which is called Medium Halls, and Small Dry Club is the impulse response in this one. And then I've just got the usual ping pong delay that I use as well. So a potential disadvantage of using these templates is that your music, after a few months, you might feel it getting a bit samey. So there are a couple of solutions to this. Solution number one is to change the template at least every 6 months. And by change it, I mean potentially change all the sounds in it, redo the process that I've shown you in this video, and then just have a whole new template. The other method is my current approach. And what I do here is much more time consuming, but essentially I will make a template for every session that I do. So that kind of, this is how I approach things. And this ensures that my tracks sound a bit more unique, even though I often reuse the same samples and the same instruments. And that's it, guys. I hope you found this informative. As soon as I started doing this, it made it a lot easier for me to make music quickly, which is something I was struggling with up until that point. So do try it. You might have to spend a few hours prepping stuff, but music production isn't all fun. There are a lot of aspects of work to it for obvious reasons. And if you're taking this seriously, you kind of need to be able to do the boring activities as well as the kind of more fun music making activities. As always, my Serum preset pack is available below the video. I've got a number of forthcoming digital products, including the sample pack, which I mentioned, and there's going to be a second Serum preset pack. And these will become available around the new year. It might be a little bit before, might be a little bit after, but I've got a few different products which I think many of you will be interested in. And yeah, thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.